Here we go. Welcome to the Transform with Travel podcast, where we share stories of personal transformation and life lessons through our experiences of traveling and exploring the world. Travel is the ultimate accelerator for personal growth, and it can be the root catalyst for the pivots and plot twists we make in our lives. I'm your host, Kelly Tolliday, and it's my mission to inspire you to live life to its fullest, travel with an open mind and heart, and let the world show you a new perspective. I'm so grateful you're here with us today, so let's dive right in. Happy exploring. Hello. Welcome to the Transform with Travel podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Tolliday, co-founder of R&R Wellness Travel and Retreats. And before we begin, to those listening, I'm going to ask a favor of you, and that is to click the subscribe button right now. If you enjoy these episodes, the easiest way to stay up to date with all of our newest episodes with incredible guests and stories like our guest today is by clicking the subscribe button. And that's all. That's all I'm asking you to do. I am so grateful to each and every one of you who listen and support this show. And I'm so stoked to welcome today's guest, Evan Orellana, Regional Manager of Surfrider for Florida and Puerto Rico. Your story is just so fun for me because as a fellow Floridian, I feel like that's everyone's dream to end up working in what you do now. At least that was my dream. So growing up in Florida, Evan received his degree in marine biology and started his career as a sea turtle nesting monitor and specialized in, you're going to have to say this word because I tried to say it and I actually tried to look up how to say it and I can't. Can you say it?
Is it the nidology?
Yes, thank you. There's no chance I was getting that right, which is the study of corals and jellyfish. Once discovering he had a natural aptitude for public speaking, his career focus changed from lab research to environmental education. Working in the field and at several prominent regional institutions, Evan eventually went on to become Director of Education at the Sandaway Discovery Center, which is a historic nature and shark conservation museum in Delray Beach, Florida. In addition to marine science, Evan is also a graphic artist and a surfer and enjoys blending his passion for the ocean, education, and art into his work and conservation efforts. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
I'm going to start the episodes with our rapid fire questions because I feel like it lets you, the listener, get to know you really quickly.
Okay.
Wait, what is he all about? So we're going to start with that and then get into the conversation. So when you go traveling, are you more inclined to seek out city or seek out nature?
Nature.
Okay. Well, this kind of makes sense. And are you more inclined for adventure excursions or arts and culture?
I would say a little bit of both, but arts and culture. I'm a big art fan, so it's just always something I have to explore there.
Amazing. Are you an aisle seat or a window seat?
I used to be a window, and now I'm an aisle.
You've matured.
I need the leg stretch, yes.
You've matured into the aisle seat. Okay, are you an overpacker or a minimalist packer?
Overpacker.
That surprises me.
I strive to be the minimalist, but I will say if it's cold weather, overpacker.
Okay.
Hot weather, I'm used to it. I can be minimalist.
Yeah, totally. And it's even harder when you're in multi-seasons, you're going to Japan to ski, but then you're also heading down to Bali after
layers.
or something. Yeah, exactly. And then the last one is, do you like to have an itinerary or you more go with the flow, see what happens?
Go with the flow.
Amazing. Okay, awesome. I feel like that gives us a good indication of who you are, so we'll find out. So you mentioned in your bio that you studied marine biology. I feel like as a Floridian, we grew up in Florida, I feel like that's part of a rite of passage is to want to be a marine biologist, a dolphin trainer, or something with sea turtles. I definitely went through that phase. And the only thing that stopped me from going down that track, I went to summer camps, I was looking at programs for college, but then I realized I was really bad at science. And when I realized there was a lot of science in biology, I was like, this might not be the thing for me. So I'm glad that there are people like you who followed the dream and held strong for us Floridians out there. What was that like for you, deciding to follow that path?
Oh, gosh. So, originally, like I was saying before, I'm from Manhattan. I'm a very classic New York transplant. Came down here back in 1990, just literally right before Hurricane Andrew. But my passion for the ocean actually started in New York. My dad worked 3 jobs. I only saw him once a week. And every Sunday, he would ask us what we want to do. And we'd always say Natural History Museum. And we'd have lunch in I don't know if you've ever been there, but the Blue Whale Cafe.
Oh, cool. I haven't been.
It's their ocean room. It's a huge replica of a blue whale above you, 100 foot. And just from doing that every day, I love the ocean, even though in Manhattan, we were from Greenwich Village, not much ocean exposure. Moved down to Florida, and I'll never forget, it was my 5th grade teacher, Mr. Gillespie was his name, random memory, but fish tanks, wall to wall in his room. Like, I mean, freshwater, saltwater, reptiles, amphibians, every animal you could think of that you could have in a classroom. From that, I just remember good grades. You could help them clean the tanks, manual labor.
Yeah, right.
But from that,
we got so conned as kids.
I'm thinking back, I'm like, wow, he really just had us do all the dirty work for good grades. But I loved it. And just like you said, sea camp, all the field trips. And it wasn't until college, because there were no marine science classes back at the high school I was at, out in Coral Springs in Broward County. But I remember in college, I was a civil engineering major, and I wasn't enjoying it. I was, at the highest level math you could take, and I just was struggling. I just wasn't passionate about it. It became from something that was interesting to something that was more mundane, in my opinion. And I remember looking through my undergraduate catalog, and I opened the book, and right first page I flipped to was Bachelor of Science, degree in marine biology. And I was like, wait, I always wanted to be a marine biologist. I wanted to train dolphins.
Yeah, exactly.
Whale watch, yeah. And from that, I just decided, this is what I want to do. It's South Florida, the ocean's everywhere. Lakes, rivers are all tied to it. So I stuck with it and got my undergrad in that. And leaving college, I just had the big pressure and thought in my mind to work in the field that I studied. Because you're right, it's so hard to continue, especially when you have a passion at a young age. It's hard to continue that when just life and the need for money or just, living comfortably starts to get a hold of you. So, I was like, I'm doing this. I'm going to stick with it. And originally I was doing the research route, cnidarians, jellyfish, corals, a lot of that research. And randomly I was working at Gumbo Limbo Nature Center in Boca. Uh-huh. And I'll never forget, I couldn't talk in front of people then. I was horrible at public speaking. I made every excuse I could to leave. I was the guy in the class. I was like, I'll do all the work if you present.
Exactly.
But the person I was presenting with, we do the sea turtle walks and we talk about an hour about sea turtle biology to the public. The person I was doing it with, I guess, got nervous because his whole family was there. And he just really wasn't feeling it, left to use the restroom, didn't come back in time. And I'm just sitting in front of people 5 minutes into the presentation, just like, okay, I'm going to do this presentation. I'm going to be honest with everybody. I am bad at public speaking. I'm going to turn around and read verbatim off these slides that I have not practiced. And they kind of laughed and chuckled a little bit, but not at me, kind of with me. Yeah. And I just started presenting. And all of a sudden, I'm talking to them. I'm cracking jokes. I'm teaching. And it doesn't feel hard or intimidating. And from that, I'm like, all right, I think an education route is what I'm going to do and excel at it. And after putting in the time and working a lot in different parts of the field, this is where I am today. And I'm just thrilled to be a part of the Surfrider Foundation, which I always wanted to be back since high school. I love the logo and the stickers and surfers fighting for the environment was like kind of my thing.
Yeah, right.
So now I feel like my whole career has gone full circle with this and just, stoked for every minute.
You got to love a good logo. It gets the people going.
It's marketing. I mean, I'll go to the market, I'll buy a wine and I'm like, why'd you pick it? What year? I'm like, oh no, the logo, the typeface. Exactly. Think about it.
And I mean, it's awesome because you're a graphic artist as well, so you appreciate it for sure. Obviously, it's landed to where you are now today, and you mentioned also that you are a surfer. Was that something that you grew up with? Because sometimes I find that it's harder to get into surfing when you're an adult because you have that fear, and it's a little harder, and you don't know the innate rules of the lineup and who's going to go first and how do I do this. And was that something that you grew up with once you moved down here, or was that something you got into later?
Obviously, when I moved down here, learning to swim better was a thing.
Priority.
Public pools in New York are different than ocean currents and riptides and everything. My mom was always a very big beach girl. She's from Brooklyn, but she lived in Hawaii for several years as a teenager and as a young adult and got really into the ocean. So she'd always take us to Deerfield Beach and get us in the water. I surfed, but kind of like that weekend teenage warrior kind of thing. Yeah. But it wasn't until in college, I think it was like 2003, 2004, that I was doing dual enrollment at a campus up in Vero Beach called Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute. And my roommate, one of them, she was a professional longboarder in like regionals, and
Cool.
she competed. And she saw my dinky Ron John foam board that I bought for like $50 at Sawgrass Mills, farthest away you can get from the water in Broward.
Yeah, they're like, this is going to work for you.
Yeah.
You're like, okay.
I'm gonna shred the gnar. She, as a legit surfer, was like, throw that away. She was van life before van life was widely known.
Wow, on the fringe.
Yes. And she opens up her van and there's like 10, 15 surfboards of all different types in there. And she literally is like when you go through a bookshelf looking for, she's going through, she's like, you know what? This one. She pulls it out, 9.6, surfboard Hawaii, like one of those wall hangers, like really resin, weighs like 40 pounds. She's like, this is what you're going to use. You're going to go out to Fort Pierce Inlet with me and surf with the actual surfers and not, the local beach with the tourists and stuff. And literally put me in the water every weekend. We were at, dual enrollment. We lived up there on campus. And from that, I was hooked. And I learned up there in the retirement Central Beach, listening to all the retirees gasp if I fell, cheer if I made the wave.
That would be like such a confidence booster when they're cheering, then also to know that like everyone's watching. They have nothing better to do than watch you either.
They set up their wind fences and they watch us.
They get the 10, the 9, the number cards like ready to score you.
I have a core memory of falling to hear from the beach. And I was like, oh, yeah, you guys are all watching me wipe out on that. Okay.
Oh, that's fun though.
But now I've been doing it for years and do a surf club locally as a passion. And I mean, I love surfing. It's literally every day. If I'm not working, if there's waves out there, I'll try to get out at least once a day for an hour or two and just catch something.
And that must have shaped your relationship with the ocean even further. Then there's one thing to be studying it and to be presenting on it and educating, but then to actually be on your board in the water, understanding like what's been changing. You can see what's been changing. That must absolutely shape everything,
Oh yeah. I mean, surfers, we have an innate understanding of waves. And as anyone surfs, really, you gain it because you're watching a wave. You understand the position of it, how it's coming from an angle. Is it going to break? And about like oceanography, like what's causing this wave? What's fetch? What's wind swell? What's even just being exposed to surf reports, you're automatically learning oceanography without realizing this is a science field. There are people who devote lives to this type of information gathering and across the world.
It's a different language, and not just learning it on the map, but then also understanding what that means when you're in the water too. So that's amazing. And so you moved down to Delray, you went to dual enrollment in Vero, you kind of been along the coast for most of your life. Do you have any travel experiences of where that's kind of shaped your passion even further for ocean conservation and coastline climate?
Yeah, so I am remiss to say I am not the most well-traveled person. I don't do the best on long flights. Like I start thinking about it and I get antsy. That's why I'm an aisle person now, so I can get up and walk around. But my father is from Guatemala, so we have done a lot of traveling down there. His sister runs a mission. My aunt runs a mission in their small town where they grew up. So we go there, do a lot of work, and then always take some time to explore. And really, I think that shaped me the most because it's given me a good perspective of the power of the ocean, what I would call like some untamed coasts, because in Florida, and especially along the U.S., not everywhere, some places are wild, but we have some pretty easy beaches in Florida. It can get rough, but generally our beaches have low currents, small waves, beautiful water. But I think the first time I surfed in Guatemala at a beach called Rico, which is not the tourist beach. It's black sand, so you got to wear shoes to walk across it. Ditch your flip-flops at the shore. You'll burn your feet. But just the power. That was the first time I really experienced a powerful wave and real ocean currents. So it gave me a really big respect, and I can't say fear, but a cautionary tale of the ocean is our planet. It shapes everything. And, especially when you go to other countries and you see how people don't just view the ocean as a recreational area, it's life. It's everything for some areas. They base economies, life, culture around it. So it definitely shaped a good perspective traveling there a lot.
Yeah, and I feel like when you do go to countries like Guatemala or in Central America or certain islands, you understand the What I'm trying to say is we are shielded a lot in America in our little bubbles that we have in different communities. We're shielded a lot of the effects of climate change. And when you go to countries like Guatemala or different Caribbean islands or the Maldives or, different islands that are on the coast or countries that don't have the infrastructure set up to be able to just plant more dunes or raise the seawalls higher, or like you really do get an on the ground look of, oh shit, like this is happening. Like right now, this is happening. So I do find that oftentimes when we travel or I meet people who have traveled, they do walk away with a renewed sense of a commitment to making a change within their communities or within themselves. I remember we were surfing in Welagama in Sri Lanka, and which is kind of like the beginner break. And we were, paddling out, and literally every single stroke, I was a plastic bag, a diaper, this. I was like, I need to get out of here. Like, this is disgusting. And then it's to no fault of these people. Like, a lot of times it's the current from other countries that are actually bringing the trash over. So, yeah, it's having a healthy dose of respect for the ocean that you learn from some of these untamed coastlines, and also being able to see some of the effects of climate change, of the issues that we're dealing with. Yeah, the impact for sure. This episode is brought to you by Child & Company. Child & Company is South Florida's first family-friendly office space featuring private offices, a professional content creation studio, and childcare for hybrid work and work-from-home parents located in Boca Raton. Child & Company is founded on the belief that you shouldn't have to choose between raising a family and being career-driven. Their core mission is to create an environment where family and work can exist in harmony. The best part to me as a mom is that you can pop in and breastfeed your baby or have lunch with your toddler if you like, and then pop back into your office for your Zoom meeting, which I think is so key, especially for newborn moms going back to work. It's the perfect transition from emerging out of the newborn bubble and getting back to the business you love. Child & Company provides you the flexibility to work in a beautifully designed, ergonomic private office with insanely good Wi-Fi connection and soundproofing, while just being steps away from your child. They have monthly themes that they base their lessons on, like exploring the animals of the Amazon, which I obviously love when children get opportunities to learn more about the world and build a sense of curiosity. Child & Company offers weekly and monthly classes and events like Zumbini, music class for babies, mindful cooking for toddlers, big kid yoga, and mindful mama community events, and so much more. I've been a member since February 2023, utilizing their private offices and their professional content creation studio. Child & Company is where all of the magic happens for this podcast. Their beautiful recording studio is soundproofed with state-of-the-art equipment, microphones, lighting, and cameras, so you can record your podcast, course content, meditation clips, and anything else you might want to record for your business. The Child & Company team truly feels like family. They are an extension of my team over here at Rising Nature Retreats and the Transform with Travel podcast, as well as an extension of my own family. If you're local to Palm Beach and Broward County, do yourself a favor and check out Child & Company. Visit www.childandcompany.com or head over to Instagram at Child & Company. So you mentioned Surfrider. That is your current role. You're regional manager for the state of Florida and for Puerto Rico. Can you explain to listeners what is Surfrider and what's your day-to-day involvement?
The Surfrider Foundation is a huge national and international nonprofit. It was founded in 1984, literally as the name implies for those who are familiar with some California breaks. Surfrider Beach, Malibu is all where it started. It was about 5 local surfers who noticed a lot of, back when Malibu was being developed heavily, a lot of water runoff, a lot of silt, a lot of construction debris plaguing the local lineup where their families, they recreate, they live. And they took it upon themselves to basically start a grassroots effort, petition local city officials, and just get some laws enforced and passed. And it started getting bigger and bigger. And now we are all throughout the U.S. We're in pretty much every coastal area. I believe we have over 180 chapters. Wow. And about 200 student clubs. And these are non-paid. These are all volunteers doing grassroots activism. And from that, we have some core missions as we protect the ocean, waves, and beaches, the enjoyment, and specifically for all people. Because we realize, like you were saying, when it comes to climate change, when it comes to ocean issues, there is an inequity between different communities, different areas of the world. And that's one thing I love about Surfrider is we don't just fight for the local stuff. We fight for everybody, every local person, whether you live in the middle of a country and nowhere near the beach, or you have the luck to be beachside wherever you are. We fight against things like plastic pollution. We fight for ocean protected areas, beach access, which is a big issue we see these days. We have an extensive fight for clean water, the right to it, because it is a right for all humans on this planet to clean water and easy drinking water. And also smart, I would say, resilience programs in communities. We're making sure we're prepared for climate change, we're prepared for things that will inevitably happen, rather than look back and say, man, I wish I was proactive back in the day. Yeah, and it's just been such an amazing ride. Out of my region, I have 12 chapters, 11 here in Florida, all throughout the East Coast, Orlando, Tampa, and then Pensacola area. And then our Puerto Rico chapter in Rincon, they do amazing work, especially with the water quality issues they have over there.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I first heard of Surfrider back when I moved back to the U.S. I lived in Australia for 5 years. Talk about untamed coastlines. Holy, yes. I had the wind knocked out of me so many times trying to surf over there. I was like, okay, maybe I need to take a step back and play in the whitewash for a little bit. But moved from Australia. I knew I was always very passionate about ocean conservation, especially after just spending the last 6 months doing, work in Sri Lanka and India and just seeing like how intense the impact of climate change has been over there. So I came back to them from the US and I was like, okay, I want to get into like a local chapter of something. I don't just want to join like a conglomerate, volunteer center or just like pay a donation to some big national thing. I want to support a national effort, but I also want to have like boots on the ground and like go to the beach cleanups, test the water, do all the things. So I literally tested, I think I wrote like Fort Lauderdale, ocean, climate, something. And immediately Surfrider popped up. And same thing, the logo, the name. I was like, I'm in. Like, I'm sold. I don't even know what they do, but I'm in. And I started with Surfrider in 2019. And I went to a bunch of the beach cleanups. And my daughters were born, so I took a step back. Of course, there was COVID. But recently, I've been starting to get more involved again because my daughters are a little older. And our dear friend Kelly Fisher, who's on the board for the Broward chapter, was like, you have to talk to Evan on your podcast. So this is how we're here today. And I'm stoked to be able to share Surfrider's message with our listeners because I think it's super important for travelers, especially because we have such an impact on where we go, whether that's just a domestic road trip up to Vero Beach or whether that's flying all across the world, because of course there's a climate impact there too. There's a footprint that's made with flights and everything. So I'd love for people to hear, not to put a downer on the conversation, but just to hear like what are some of the biggest threats right now to oceans, like that Surfrider is actively trying to, maybe the word isn't prevent because we know it's happening, but actively trying to mitigate.
Yeah. It's interesting, like you just said, there's nothing to do preventing things anymore. In fact, a lot of times when we use language like solutions or remedies, it's really non-existent. All these things we're doing these days are adaptations to try to mitigate or lessen our impact on the environment. Because like you said, with travel and flights, there is no easy answer. There is no way somebody can just say, I'm getting everything done across the board, because life just doesn't always work as easy as that. Mm-hmm. Some of the biggest threats, I would say, facing our oceans today, one, obviously, climate change. And our oceans, that's a broad term because our planet is an ocean. Like, we are sitting on the 25% bit of land. Most of the planet is all the ocean water. But climate change through man-made global warming, there's a big difference between natural global warming and man-made. And a lot of people don't understand that distinction, but we call it anthropogenic. It's made by our impact on the environment. And then obviously, and especially something travelers can see and see very easily, is the plastic pollution crisis, specifically centered around single-use plastics or disposable plastics. Because, again, there's no one easy answer. Plastics have made it a lot easier to travel. Airplanes are much lighter. Things, it does help in some ways, but it's our consumption of single-use plastics within recreational, commercial industries that have really been plaguing our ocean. I mean, the impacts are more than we even know. We're just finding out about the chemicals in our blood, in our bodies, in our seafood, in endangered species. So I would say that's the two biggest things, obviously, and climate change is a broad umbrella. But I would say as far as traveling goes, it's the plastics that we can really see the impact it's been having on our world.
Yeah, I always tell this story, but we were in India in the middle of the desert. We're in Jaisalmer. So we're in the middle of this Rajasthani desert. We're like 100 miles from the Pakistani border. We're literally in the middle of the nowhere camping overnight in this desert. And there's a cow that had died and it was on its side and it was decomposing. But obviously the vultures or all the predators had come and taken what they needed. And in the middle of this cow's intestines was plastic. In the middle of this desert, in the middle of nowhere, this cow had eaten plastic somehow. So it's like, I was like, whoa, if plastic could infiltrate this completely remote, it took us like a day to get into the middle of the desert off on a camel. Like, it's mind-boggling when you see something like that. You're like, wow, this is not a far away problem. This is not a throw it in the trash and don't think about it anymore. Like, it's everywhere.
Yeah. And I mean, and I think that is the statement that has caused the most problem with our thought behind plastic, especially single use, is that once we throw it away, it's gone. And I mean, that is the catch-22 of human nature, is we tend to, as animals, think about what affects our lives and our survival, but we don't understand that these things don't go away. You used to see like these signs that say, oh, a water bottle takes 200 years to degrade. We don't know that. We haven't had 200 years of water bottles. There's no time machine. So we're finding plastics everywhere. In fact, I mean, in the ocean, plastics have been located in every sea at every depth. I believe they literally have a huge article, I wasn't going to say it was Nat Geo, but plastic at the bottom of the Antarctic Sea, the most remote place in the entire planet. On the bottom of the seafloor below Antarctica, there's a plastic water bottle. It's everywhere. There's about 150 million tons estimated floating in the ocean. That's just what floats. There's almost an equal amount that sinks. So it's farther down. Microplastics are the new issue that we're discovering, that these plastics that we thought would take time to degrade are not. They're just breaking into smaller pieces and then being ingested by plankton, which been eaten by bigger fish. And then by the time you get a salmon from the market, there could be microplastics in it. BPAs, the PFSAs, those chemicals that we literally worry about every day, but we wouldn't expect it from these sources that are new to us. You know?
It's like you buy the BPA-free water bottle
but
in
you
the store
have
to
some
reuse
sushi
it.
And really
Exactly.
You're getting more BPA than could be in that bottle.
Exactly.
It's crazy to think about that.
And even from like what I think about, especially as living in Florida on the coast, and I grew up here my whole life. I was born and raised here. My parents were raised here. Like, we have a very, deep-rooted tradition of family here in Florida. And just to see every year what's the word I'm looking for? The dunes getting drawn back, every hurricane, we have to build the seawalls higher. And it's like, this is happening to us. It's happening in a small island in the middle of the Indian Ocean. And it's also happening to us right now. And so it's hard to like continue to put our heads in the sand and think that this isn't happening. And so like you said, like until people start seeing, which they are now, like, whoa, this is a problem, then that's hard to get people on board with the change. One thing that I do find is people don't know a lot of what's happening on a legislative level, whether it's their local government, their state government, their federal government. A lot of what Surfrider does is actually boots on the ground, going to Tallahassee in the capital, going to capitals all around different states around the country, federal legislation, like really trying to make people aware and talk to the senators and talk to the House of Representatives to help them get on board with certain bills and help them oppose certain bills, even though it might be controversial for their party lines, right? That's like the line you got to toe all the time. Can you explain a little bit about what's happening on a legislative level that is affecting our coast, whether that's like positive or negative, things that you found in this past session, I guess, for Florida?
Yeah, so that's one great thing about Surfrider is while there's a lot of environmental groups out there doing amazing work, I always like to say Surfrider goes beyond the beach. We're not just beach cleanups. We do actual lobbying work. Like you said, we meet with legislators, whether it's federal, state, local. We are a nonpartisan group, so we really try to walk the line between everything. Personally, I think it's a shame that environmentalism has become a partisan issue when it's a public health crisis.
Well, everything's a partisan issue.
Yes. And a lot of my friends are like, wow, you're really bold taking this job in Florida, in places. But there is, I will say, hope. But it's one of those things where regardless of what I say is the climate of the politicians in Tallahassee or DC. It really takes people, everyday people, speaking up about the issues that are important to them. Because as much as we think we're not being heard, there's power in voice. And it just takes a little more effort to make your voice heard, but it echoes for so long. Speaking in Florida, this legislative session, which is has wrapped up, we did get a little more hope out of it than we thought, especially when it focuses around our clean water issues, which all Floridians know, we are no stranger to it. We have horrible water management in Florida, and not anyone's particular fault these days, but the way Florida was founded and built was based on destroying our natural environment, whether it's the Everglade flow, whether it's coastal development. In a perfect world, our cities would end at the intracoastal. And that island, the barrier islands of Florida, would be our protective barrier and our public beaches, and we would never have a problem. Oh, I shouldn't say that, but we'd never have a problem for many more hundreds of years to come. But because Florida was developed so fast and so hard by just a lot of interest, we just see all these water quality problems. But like I was saying, this year we saw the passing of what they call the Safe Waterways Act, which is an amazing bill that will allow monitoring, more up-to-date monitoring, more funding for our Florida Healthy Beaches program, which is our state water quality testing program, which has so many holes in it, gaps, alert issues. So it's really necessary that it's been overhauled. And that went through the session. We didn't see as much luck on our mangrove priorities. Mangroves, which I'm sure everyone on your podcast knows because they're prevalent throughout the world, but we have 4 in the Florida region, or I should say 3, and another one kind of wishes the mangrove. They are amazing at erosion control, mitigating flood issues, barriers against wave action, as well as blue carbon storage, which is storing carbon from the atmosphere and locking it up. Didn't quite see a big push on that. It always a little tough. Seawalls, unfortunately, are very popular in Florida as they tend to be viewed as a stronger barrier against rising seas. But they also increase erosion for areas all around them. So they take away your public beach, they take away your sand, but they protect those homes for a little bit longer. So we have seen, unfortunately, a larger push for private seawalls, especially now that the state is funding those private seawalls. But, there's a lot of optimism out there. And I guess that's the main point of any environmental view is you got to be optimistic. Because if you focus on the things that are going bad, you're never going to feel like you're making any progress. And on a federal level, we do see a lot. We were hoping that the current administration would have kept the promise of discontinuing future offshore oil leases. Fortunately, that wasn't the case, but at least it wasn't extensive as we thought. But these are things that, we just all have to deal with as we develop more technology for renewable energy sources, whether it's responsible wind. I don't say all wind projects, but responsible wind projects, solar, build the infrastructure for it. I feel like we are at least having those important conversations from the top so we can facilitate that. Yeah, I could talk all days about lobbying efforts. It's not always the fun part.
I think it's important to know this work is this work is being done because then for me as a potential donor, a monthly donor, it's like, whoa, okay, I'm actually making such a big impact to allow these people to go to the Capitol, to go make these campaigns. And I think it's important that people know that it's how much of the detail of a lot of people from Florida know about mangroves, right? Or you learn about it in your science class, even if you're from Ohio or Montana or something, but you don't know like the protections that they need until you hear something like that and you're like, oh, of course we need the mangroves, but you would never think about something like that. So it is important for people to hear that. And also for travelers who are listening to this podcast who might come to Florida, because recently I was in the Keys with my sister and her friends for her bachelorette. And there's a girl from Tennessee that was there. And she was like, what is that really like fishy sulfur smell? And I was like, oh, that's the smell of the mangroves. So, like, because I love them so much. Oh, yeah. I was like, this is the smell of Florida. And so it's important for people to not think it's just some like weird, gunky, like swampy thing over there. Like it is so important. So I love that you explained that. So thank you for all of that. And so speaking of people who are traveling, whether that's state to state, city to city, country to country, from Surfrider's perspective, what can travelers do to minimize their impact on coasts and oceans?
First, it's depending on where you're traveling. Obviously, the first thing you want to think of is how you're getting there. We know air travel has a lot of mission issues, but one thing you could do, like with any transportation, make sure you're on big flights. The more people who can share a flight, the less the impact is overall individually. Smaller flights, charter jets, they have a higher impact because they're traveling with less people. Talk about going places, cruise ships. be aware of the impacts of these places. I wore this shirt for a reason. Our Florida Keys chapter is going through a huge issue with gigantic cruise ships being allowed in their port, bigger than the port was ever meant to hold. These cruise ships kick up silt. They kick up turbulence that has been destroying local seagrass, fisheries, coral reefs around the area. It takes almost 4 days for the water to clear up after these giant, for perspective, bigger than the Titanic cruise ships come into Key West Port, which is a small port. It's not a
And
major
within
one.
4 days, another cruise ship's probably
Coming in,
already
exactly.
coming.
So I would say the first thing for travelers is be aware of your impact of getting there. Also, we talked about plastics. Be aware of what you're packing. Try to bring reusables, whether you're traveling, whether you're local, international. There's so many great stores out there that sell reusable travel things, whether they're refilleries or zero waste stores. I always like to bring a bamboo utensil set because I'll need that more than anything. A non-plastic toothbrush, things that just can be out there responsible. Shampoo bars, conditioner bars. There's so much good options out there, which yes, you will spend a little more, but that is the trade-off. You have to spend a little more if you can afford, especially if you're traveling, you probably are fine. Also, too, it alleviates your need to use single-use plastics in some poorer countries, or I shouldn't say poor, but some underrepresented countries. Because, like you said, it's not their fault. They don't have, island nations don't have access to silverware, glass. It's imported stuff. Things aren't made there. It's expensive. So single use allows them to keep their families fed and reduce their costs in their restaurants or their businesses. So rather than put it on them to be using reusable or silverware, it's up to more of the traveler to think about that stuff.
Absolutely. You think about the infrastructure. Where would all of this trash go? And like you said, it's not just, especially when you're traveling to places like Thailand, Sri Lanka, all of those countries, Vietnam. I remember we were on a beach in Thailand in this little remote island, and this whole beach was covered in travel-sized shampoo, toothpaste, toothbrushes, all the things that you're like, wow, you can make such a difference by just bringing things that you don't need to toss and then think, oh, this country's got this waste management covered, because they don't. Or the currents bring it from another country, and then now this island is dealing with the aftermath. And what I always love is I think about the non-alcoholic movement right now. There's every major beer brand has an NA option. So if everyone who's traveling and or just making a change for the environment decides, I'm going to buy a shampoo bar, I'm going to buy, like you said, reusable XYZ, then that Crest might turn around and be like, oh, we're going to have fill stations in Whole Foods, or we're going to create, maybe Procter & Gamble decides we're going to create a shampoo bar instead. And it's like, those are the ways that your consumer, your economic dollar can start to make an impact on the macro scale.
And that's also coming back to my point about like even getting involved in politics. It's up to us to do something, to make that little extra effort, because your individual voice may not seem like a large, loud thing, but when you have 1 million, 2 million people, saying the same thing, that drives the world. It's a slow process. It's the long game, but that's what really takes effect. And like you said, if a major company, Unilever or one of those, ever decides, you know what, we're going to do a whole line, we're going to not worry about making as much profit as it, and we're going to put it out there. That's a huge deal that somebody even took the time to consider that and to hear your voice. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, and the profit part of it is still going back to this non-alcoholic movement. I don't drink anymore. I still pay the same amount for a non-alcoholic beer.
Mocktail still has the same price.
It's almost more now. So it's like, if they just get a little creative and start listening to what people want, I think that's super, super powerful. Even the power of influencing your environment, right? So sometimes I'll go into Publix and I always forget to bring my bags or something like that. And I walk in and I see the lady next to me has her bags and I'm like, oh, I'm going to do better next time. It's like if that collective action, if you get enough people to all be doing the quote unquote right thing to do, then you start to churn and shift people's minds around it. And that makes a small difference. So,
exactly. And that's, probably what I've seen the most in getting into environmental education is you could have lobbying efforts, you can have beach cleanups, you can have so many good things that you're doing. But if there's no educational component, if you're not talking to people saying, hey, this is why these people are doing this, or this is why they have to do it, or what you can do, there's never going to be a change. Many people I talk that are traveling, they say, well, I went to Puerto Rico, which is not far and part of us. But, they're like, oh, they had to use single use. I'm like, well, they don't import it. It's too much money. Puerto Rico's having a huge trash issue because the landfills are almost full. Our new slogan there for all the mostly tourists is that where is it going to go? Where are all the transplants living there? I'm like, where is all your trash going to go? In our trash, we don't have a trash solution. We ship it off to other countries and let them deal with it. So yeah, it's always a huge deal. And as a traveler, the more you can bring reusable, the more, environmentally friendly you can be, the better it's going to be in the future. Yeah.
And that's another huge thing is when you're going to countries or places that have those infrastructure, waste management issues. I can't remember what country it was in, but it was a big diving hotspot that we went to. And there was a big poster, a big sign in the airport that said, you're more likely to see a plastic bottle than you are to see a turtle. And it was like, ooh, I came all this way, spent all this money, and to see this turtle, right? Or see this whale shark or whatever it is that people do. And it really hit you like, wow, this is on me. And that you're almost exploiting this place because you want to see what you want to see and then you want to get out. And it's like being a lot more conscious, sustainable minded as a traveler. So I love all those tips. I'd also, just to round out the episode, what can travelers look for, whether that's here in the United States? I know that we have a special designation for these types of businesses, but maybe when they're also overseas, what can travelers look out for in businesses and restaurants while they're out on the road to support climate and ocean-friendly businesses, restaurants, hotels, whatever that might look like?
I can't say particular if there's a uniform certification or, approval process for green businesses. But one thing I think all travelers do well is plan. They know where they're going. They like to see what's ahead. Look up the businesses you're supporting. Make sure and be equitable. Make sure, if you're going, don't book the big overseas hotel that may have all-inclusive, but, they also do this and they have this business and they have everything wrapped in plastic. Find local things. Support the local indigenous native groups there, the local people, because that's the real travel part you're coming for. Be mindful of everything. If you don't have the opportunity to be mindful like that, make better choices. It is totally easy when you're having dinner at a restaurant, at whatever resort, wherever you're traveling, and they drop some plastic down, a straw, plastic. No, thank you. I don't mind tilting my cup, doing the normal stuff. I have my own silverware. So just not feeling bad about speaking up in appropriate fashion, but being aware of just who you're buying from, who you're booking with, and make the best efforts to support the local economy, the true local economy, and not just the tourist economy, which happens, unfortunately, a lot in travel.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned saying no to the plastic straw, the plastic silverware, because obviously we all are going to bring our own. In the U.S., at least, for those who are traveling domestically, they can look up on the Surfrider website who is a ocean-friendly restaurant. And Kelly is going to love that we're mentioning ocean-friendly restaurants because she spearheads that division of the chapter. Can you let us know what is an ocean-friendly restaurant? How do they get that designation, and how can people search for those types of restaurants when they're traveling around domestically?
Yeah. So, the Ocean Friendly Restaurant Program is our sustainable restaurant practice sign up. I will say we have the strictest program out of all the ones I've seen so far in the country. But essentially, we have 7 mandatory criteria that these restaurants have to follow, whether it's no single-use plastics, no disposables, sourcing local seafood if possible, having seasonal menus, to even recycling practices, water conservation practice. We have a great website, oceanfriendlyrestaurants.surfrider.org, where you can go on and see the map of the whole U.S. And not just the U.S. We have Surfriders in other countries,
Oh, really?
Surf Australia, Japan,
cool.
Europe. So you're able to see these businesses and, make that personal choice to support somebody who's doing a little more effort, maybe making a little less profit to really better our future. And that's really it. We need to uplift the groups that are doing the work for us, because it's not just the business's responsibility. It's ours as travelers, as consumers. So yeah, ocean-friendly restaurants, amazing. Broward has quite a few. And we're seeing it catch on. It is tough because, especially after the pandemic, a lot of restaurants are still to this day playing catch up on their bottom line and everything. We're starting to see a lot more progress moving forwards with that.
Yeah. And I think that, like you said, as a traveler, making that decision, that choice to support that restaurant, because as you said, the profit margin might look a little different to the restaurant next to them that aren't making those mindful, conscious choices. And to get that positive reinforcement using your dollar to show them, okay, I see what you're doing and I'm supporting you. It helps them continue to re-sign up every year to be that ocean-friendly restaurant. Instead of saying, this didn't really, no one really noticed and so down the road is doing nothing. So why am I putting the brunt on it? So yeah, one of our podcast sponsors, Bite in Lighthouse Point, they're an ocean-friendly restaurant
Delicious.
as well. Yeah, amazing. So I just wanted to give them a little shout out. But yeah, this was honestly so incredible. I am feeling just so inspired to relook at all of my choices. And one thing that I want to point out is you mentioned, get the reusable cutlery and this, and something that I see a lot is people just go out and just buy more things because they're just like, I want to have, all the latest reusable stuff, or I see the new Stanley Cup or the new this. And it's like, actually take a look at what you already have and see if that can be something that you can travel with. Maybe you don't travel with the butter knife in your carry-on, but just take a look at what you already have instead of going out and buying even more things,
They will let you travel with a bamboo cutlery. They won't let you travel with silverware. Although, I will say once I was in California and I didn't bring my reusable. I'm like, wow, I really want to just have some. I went into a thrift shop and I just went to their kitchen aisle and I grabbed a fork, a knife, and I brought it back to my hotel. I cleaned it and I'm like, great, now I don't have to unwrap this plastic silverware set the hotel left me for my takeout and stuff, and literally secondhanded it, which another thing we didn't talk about, but secondhand is an amazing way to get stuff when traveling, because if you got to buy something, the prices are always cheaper. If you like thrifting like I do, it's kind of an adventure. You never know what you're going to find, especially in another country. You can find some gems and you've gotten a souvenir without consuming a new product, because that's just like you said, I have a strict rule in my house. I don't accept any more tote bags. I don't take any more water bottles that are reusable because I have too many already, and that's not the point of reusable, is to collect them. You get some that work and you keep with it and you reuse, reduce with it.
So how can listeners support Surfrider, whether that's a local chapter here in Florida or in California, in New York, or wherever they are, anywhere in the country? How can they support Surfrider and the mission that you guys have?
So I usually have a saying that whereas there's different levels of support. Obviously the basic level, live clean, do the right things, make the effort to go a little bit farther and make eco-friendly choices, because that's what we're fighting for. And that's the main thing we need people to do. And never say, it's hard when you're like, oh, I have to spend a little more on that. I used to joke with my students when I would do these big talks about nature and environment. I'd be like, guys, if you can go to Starbucks one day a week and buy a $7 coffee, you can take one of those out and split that up and buy the ocean-friendly seafood or sustainable this or reusable that. So easiest way to help our mission. The other thing is get involved. Activism takes free time. I understand, not everyone has it. We are blessed in this country to have usually an abundance of free time compared to other communities. Volunteer. Check out your local Surfrider chapter. If you go on surfrider.org or florida.surfrider.org, you can see a list of all of our local chapters. They all have their own events page. They do cleanups, social events. Sometimes they'll do, like in Palm Beach, we're doing microplastic sampling along the beaches, a little more technical for the older volunteers. If you are looking to get a little bit more involved, come out to one of the chapter meetings and meet the leadership in the chapter. A lot of people think our Surfrider chapters are huge and there's so many people working on it, but it comes down to 4 or 5 hardcore volunteers who are super passionate, like the Broward chapter, who are devoting their time, and really at least 20 hours a week sometimes, to dedicating our future to be better. Come out, meet them, get involved, especially if you have passion, skills in whether it's, environmentalism, social media, marketing, talking to people. If you're a good public speaker, if you like to surf, if you swim well, these are all things we look for in our groups. And then, of course, the ultimate form of getting involved is become a chapter leader. And we really look for that grassroots leadership in our chapter. My role is not to tell our chapters what to do. It's not to give them projects or things to do. I literally just say, that's an idea you have? I love it. Here's how we can make that better. Here's how we can get that into reality. And just basically support our everyday chapter folk, our volunteers, in their efforts to make this environment better. And not just for us, for our future. That's the whole point of environmentalism, is the longevity of the planet Earth.
Yeah, and building that community, it sounds to me kind of like your whole story of loving that connection with your community and the surfers, and then with your position at the Sandaway and getting into Surfrider, and it's like all of these this forward momentum, but built by the foundation of this community that you have. And something that I found volunteering when I can with Surfrider is you just leave those chapter meetings feeling like, yes, there is a lot weighing on this, and there's a lot of things that you can look at, like you said, that might make you feel sad or make you feel like, what is anything working? But that optimism, that hope that you get from every meeting and every interaction. And something I tell people all the time is if you're moving somewhere new or you're trying to break away from a certain friend group and you're not sure what to do, but you're interested in ocean conservation or you're interested in something, like join a chapter, because you're going to make friends. Like I look at the friends in the Broward County group, and it's so amazing to see that you can rally around a cause that you love and make lifelong friends in the process.
Exactly. Yes. It's funny. I say the exact same thing to all the chapters. I remember my Keys chapter, new chair. I'm like, get your friends involved. You're all ocean people. Mm-hmm. You sail, you surf, you dive. Get involved. It becomes fun, because that's really the way we need to frame our grassroots activism. Is it has to be rewarding in some way, and it's so tough to make environmentalism rewarding. We offer climate cafes, we offer climate counseling for our volunteers, because it's a lot, And you've been to a chapter meeting. You got to come to one of our regional conferences where we meet the rest of Florida Surfrider. In this October, we're having our 40th anniversary for Surfrider Super Summit in Long Beach, California, where 400 Surfrider volunteers throughout the entire U.S. are going to come together and share stories and train and just pretty much see that they are not alone. And that's the main thing to remember, is you're not alone in wanting to do better. But it takes a village to make change. It doesn't take an individual.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so stoked to share this conversation, and I hope that everyone listening is able to take just one small nugget and apply it to their life or share it with a friend. And this is one of those episodes that I am going to encourage everyone listening, just send it to one person, right? Send this episode link, just say, hey, this is really empowering information on how we can do better as travelers. So everyone listening, I'm going to put that on you, share it with a friend, because this is something that can truly change the world. And the more that people who are traveling and making impacts and having conversations with people around the world, just one small bit of information can change someone's life or change someone's community. So it's so powerful. I would love for our listeners to be able to connect with you, connect with Surfrider. What's the best way for them to shout out and say hi?
So the best way, I would say, would be through probably our social media. I use Instagram more than I use Facebook, I will admit. So on Instagram at Surfrider FLPR is my account that I keep to answer all your questions. If you have environmental questions, thoughts about traveling, anything, or want to get connected with your local chapter, please reach out. Otherwise, it's Orellana at surfrider.org, EORELLANA, surfrider.org. I'm available to listen to your stories and talk. And that's really the main thing travelers can do. You mentioned what can do is share their stories, because it's usually the people who travel that experience what's going on in the world firsthand. And you can't really care about the environment until something affects you, whether it's something amazing, something horrible, some eye-opening thing. That's usually how environmentalism starts, is because we finally see beyond our own day-to-day comfort, and that's really where we need to start sharing more.
And once you see it, you can't unsee it.
No, exactly. The leeward sides of an island. One island side is always nice. One has all the trash.
Exactly.
And once you see it, it's never going away.
So I almost forgot before I wrapped up this episode, is I always end with these questions. Okay. So you can go as quick or as fast, or as much as you want, as much detail as you like. But I always end with these questions, and I almost forgot. I was like, oh my God, people are going to be mad at me. So number one, what country or place in the world has made the biggest impact on you?
Oh gosh. So even though I've never been there, Australia, because it has all the deadliest things in the world, and it has some of the most beautiful areas in the world. But as a nidologist studying venomous and toxic, poisonous sea animals, Australia's always intrigued me. I do want to go someday. Like I said, long plane. I'm the guy running up and down the aisle about 6 hours in, doing yoga or something.
Got the compression socks on.
Oh my God,
that's so funny, because my husband's Australian, and we go all the time, and people are always like, aren't you so afraid of all the things that can kill you there? And I'm like, oh, it's, you never see them. And then to hear you be like, that's the most venomous place in the world.
Literally, you got the blue ring octopus, you got the irukandji jellyfish, and you have the stonefish. You have
okay, that's enough. Okay.
But I'm fascinated by these things.
I'm like, I don't want to hear it. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. So don't tell me. Okay, number 2, what's your go-to travel accessory or must-have?
Honestly, my favorite thing to travel with is I have like the water bottle that you unscrew and it's like a bowl and there's utensils in the bottom.
Oh, I've never seen that.
Sometimes I'm always like, if I travel alone, I don't always go out and sit down at a restaurant or a food place. Sometimes I just want to get my food, go back to the porch, sit on a hammock. So I bring that, but I'm always like, oh, I don't have a bowl or I didn't get silver. It's always in that, and I always just carry it around.
Okay, you have to send me the link, and I'm going to link it in the show notes, because that's something I want to get. Okay, and the last one is, what's the biggest life lesson you've learned while traveling?
Honestly, I think it was the first time I visited my relatives in Guatemala. My father has like an insane story about how he came here when he was 13 by himself, and growing up very privileged in South Florida. I didn't quite understand what other people went through, until I think I was 14 and I went there for the first time. And specifically realizing hot showers were a luxury for me, and seeing just where he grew up and how people have to live, not in the tourist areas, not in what you see when you visit, but in places where you really get off the beaten path, especially traveling to the Pacific Coast. I'm like, wow, that makes me really appreciate the sacrifices he did, not even going to school, just working from 14 up until when they had me, kind of seeing that. And it gives me a unique perspective, I feel like, which, aside from me being a surfer and marine biologist, working with Surfrider, not many people see me and realize, wow, this person understands some different social economic issues. And looking at me, you're not thinking, oh, Guatemalan. Yeah. But no, it's probably been the most impact on me in my life. Hot showers, I will say, specifically having to click on a little hot coil and hope I don't get electrocuted just to get a hot shower after surfing all day. That was the most humbling experience. And see how nonchalantly locals there, just like, yeah, no, a hot shower? Oh, yeah, every now and then, but just take a quick rinse,
Mm-hmm. And to have that experience at such a young age, too, I think is a super powerful experience. Helps shape everything that you view your world from, that lens, from that perspective, just shifts. And to see that so young, I think, is an amazing experience. And also why I advocate taking your kids traveling as much as you can. Obviously, there's financial restrictions sometimes, but
perspective anywhere. I mean, making memories with kids and traveling, especially here in Florida, there's so many great areas that you can go to show them different communities and how we're all people and we all have the same level of interest, respect, love, everything. So yeah, no, travel opens minds.
Well, and I love this quote. I see it a lot now. It's something like, if you don't show your kids how to respect or appreciate or have fun in nature, they're not going to grow up appreciating, respecting, and having fun in nature, right? So it's like raising that generation of future climate conservationists and ocean lovers, and that's how you build generation upon generation of people who want to protect what they love.
I will say, we talked about how I got involved in everything, specifically at the museum. I'll never forget this, but and at the time I thought it was the owner of the museum, but it was more likely a retiree volunteer. But there was this children's section, it had fish tanks, and I remember always, every Sunday, this one volunteer would let me feed Pet Supermarket fish food to the fish in the tanks. And that literally changed this was like, this is so cool. Did you know I work for the museum? Yeah, I go in and the owner lets me feed. I think they were the beta fish. I think they were just beta fish in a kid's. But I thought I was like science. I got to go behind these doors, mix food, test pH with like a simple pH test strip that anyone can do. And that was the highest level for me when I was a kid. And I was like, that's it. I'm a scientist. I'm going to stick with it. I'm a marine biologist. And kept with it.
Here you are.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, I love that story. I'm glad we got there. I'm so glad we got to that story. Thank you so much. It's been an honor to have you on the podcast. I'm so excited for people to listen and share and just learn from you. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for supporting Surfrider. It's hard work, but I'm so glad there's people like you and our chapter and everyone just really putting the time in to make the difference for the next generation.
One step at a time.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Transform with Travel podcast. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode of inspiration, adventure, and exploration. If you felt inspired by this episode, please rate and review in whatever streaming app you're listening from. This allows us to spread the word even more and continue to serve up weekly doses of adventure. As always, we'd love if you could share the episode with someone in your life who you think will benefit from this conversation. Thanks so much for listening. This is your reminder to get out there and keep on exploring.